In this episode, I talk with Beau Shepherd and Kyle Dubé, founders of Woodward Throwbacks and authors of a new book, Throwbacks Home Interiors. They share their journey from salvaging materials on the streets of Detroit to creating unique furniture pieces in what is now a 24,000 square foot warehouse and storefront. We talk about several things that align with slow style as well, including the benefits of trial and error, starting with a piece that you love as the inspiration for an entire room, and the value of bringing something one of a kind into your home. Let's get started. Beau Shepherd and Kyle Dubé, welcome to the Style Matters podcast. I'm going to let you, in your own words, just give us the quick backstory about how you came to start this thriving company.
Awesome. Well, first off, thanks for having us. Woodward Throwbacks started as a passion project. Me and Kyle, my partner, we met at a community cleanup and our friendship developed. And one of our favorite things to do was bike around the city of Detroit, explore different neighborhoods, look at the architecture because Detroit has such an amazing array of different buildings and different architecture styles. And we came across illegal dumping. Illegal dumping was a really big issue in 2014. And so this was literally just raw construction materials, maybe some furniture, some antiques that were just tossed on the side of the road. And so we were just taking these pieces back and just making furniture for our own selves, like shelving, coffee table. And then Kyle's the one that really kind of spearheaded it into a brand and a business because I had a full-time career. I was an interior designer or car designer doing interiors at General Motors. Yeah. So I moved to Detroit for that reason. And I completely shifted once me and Kyle developed a really awesome concept.
The city's changed so much in the process. Contractors just dump their garbage in the street instead of paying for it to get removed. And, we just saw that as kind of this opportunity. Me and her both have always been drawn to texture and honest, warm materials. And here it is in front of us everywhere. And, we didn't really have any tools per se, like just kind of like your general home toolbox. And both creative, we have creative hands-on parents that we kind of grew up in those environments. So it just kind of came natural and we've evolved it ever since. We're not doing illegal dumping sites now. Now we're working with contractors and developers on buildings that are being rehabbed or torn down and saving box trucks, semi-truck loads of materials at a time. And whether we're creating capsule collections of furniture or doing bespoke millwork pieces for some of our interior design projects, really being creative on what can be used with this material that's otherwise going to be thrown away.
Yeah. And I want to just put a little bit of context here. You explain this in the book that the economy bottomed out. And so people were leaving their homes, mass exodus, right? And so that's why there was all of this excess stuff and people, contractors just left it on the street. It was just cheaper for them than to haul it away. So the city was going through a downturn and you guys are definitely, I think, part of the revitalization. So, so now we get where it started. I want to ask you about something that you say right in the introduction. And I'm going to quote you. You say that adaptive reuse is a way of honoring parts, pieces, and moments of history while also acknowledging that we live in the 21st century and that convenience and functionality are key. So could you give us an example or two of how you've adapted an old piece into something that really works for a modern home?
People think that we're preservationists when they first meet us, and we are in our own minds, but not in like the American sense of the terms, right? We're not taking a Victorian home and restoring it as Victorian to the T with, hot water heaters and old wood windows. Like, we're taking these buildings that usually are going to be torn down if we don't get to them. And we always save as much architectural stuff as we can, but realistically, it's 2024. I want to have a nice, comfortable house. We have radiant floor heating in this building now. And also style-wise, if you have a Victorian house, you don't have to have a full Victorian aesthetic.
Right.
Put mid-century modern in there, put industrial stuff in there. Whatever speaks to you, let it be in there because it's your home and you don't need to be pigeonholed to the style of your house. I think it's easy for people to say, I have a Victorian home, I have Victorian style now. Well, that's just a cop out. Like, what do you really like? And I
Right.
think that's where we try to help people embrace their own individuality.
Well, and
So,
the mix is where I think the energy is, right? And you got, I mean, that's what you are showcasing in this book is this mix of different eras and styles while still really honoring the pieces that are really indicative of that era or that style. One of my favorite things that you say in the book is that making impulse buys and learning how to fit them into your space, this is how you'll develop your one-of-a-kind style. And this really gets to one of the core skills that I teach in my slow style framework, which is the practice of creative thinking. So trying something out, living with it for a while, and learning from that. I'm wondering, how has that practice of trial and error come up for you guys? Have you salvaged something and then realized you weren't going to be able to use it after all? Or have you held on to something and saved it and then one day went, oh my gosh, this is it. This is where we're going to finally use that old whatever.
Yeah, the loft that I
Okay.
designed. There's this red, beautiful kitchen that was made out a hardware display cabinet
Yeah.
from a woman-owned hardware store in Detroit.
Wait,
And
a
me and
woman-owned
Kyle had,
hardware store in Detroit?
yes,
yeah.
they were
Wow.
the Detroit Hardware, what was called, was just shy of being 100 years old. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, we had the pleasure of getting to know these women, and we were able to save all of their hardware display cabinets, a whole bunch of miscellaneous things. But there was one cabinet that I turned to Kyle, I'm like, listen, we are not selling this piece because I am going to design this into a project. I don't know when, I don't have a client in mind. Maybe
Wow.
we use it for ourselves. And so 3 years later, I
Wow.
get the client who just so happens to be in the same neighborhood as Detroit Hardware. And my dream finally came true of designing the piece back into the space. And the cherry on top was that the piece was back in its original neighborhood. Fortunately for us, we have a 3-car garage and also a 24,000 square foot warehouse where we can store all of
Right.
our really large things. Our kitchen island for our newest residential project, we bought this amazing workbench and we were going to use it as the island in the kitchen. And I had our team completely refinish it. We're going to modify it, so we can put a sink in it. And just the other day, me and Kyle were like, you know what? This isn't it. So we're going to
Interesting.
sell it. And I think that's okay to love something, to work on it. And then, if you have a change of heart, throw it on Marketplace.
Right.
It's
Yeah, it'd be good
something
for someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Someone else is going to love that thing for sure.
The part that I love about our projects, you have to be open to changing things on the fly. We really treat our projects as art pieces. And sometimes when you start putting things up on the wall, you realize, hey, it looked good on the computer, but it's not really coming out the way I want it to right
Right.
now. And or something else comes into the shop the day or the week beforehand that you're like, I think I might like this better.
Right. Right.
And
Scrap everything. This is the piece. Yeah.
exactly.
It's so helpful, I think, for people to hear you guys say this because you work with stuff all the time. And I think that there might be an assumption that you never make any mistakes. You never make a choice that you then backtrack on, or that you then end up doing something else with a piece that you've salvaged that you weren't expecting to. You've got a lot of cabinetry where the front and sometimes even the sides are pieces of old signage, advertising signage, or, from storefronts or whatever. Did you know right away
Yeah.
that sign is going to be the front of a cabinet, or did you not,
No.
No.
Yeah. We probably had the signs in the shop for like a year or two. And
Okay.
it's like, hey, let's see if we can cut this one up and figure out how to do something with it.
Yeah.
So if you really look at our house, we use found signs as art. Me and Kyle love art, and we feel like signs are the easiest way to add texture, that like honest texture, because it's been outside, it's been in the dumpster, it's had its own past life. And that's kind of me and Kyle's thing. We make functional art.
I would say our whole thing too is kind of imagining what something can be rather than what it is. I think we're on our 3rd or 4th batch of these, and each time we've learned something about it and we've changed the process up a little bit. And Bo and I both feel that we're not there yet. they're
Huh.
not where we want them to be yet, but they're getting closer every
Yeah.
time. And it's just kind of an evolution of our art, and as far as these cabinets go, and it's something that we really enjoy playing around with.
Yeah. I love that question. What else could this be? I encourage people to think about that with stuff they even already own. If it's a dresser that has been in a guest room or a bedroom and you're changing things up, well, what else could it hold? It could hold something in the dining room or the kitchen, right? It could become the place where you store all of your cutlery and your tablecloths and all that kind of stuff in the kitchen, as opposed to throwing it out and then buying a piece that's made specifically for kitchens or whatever. You also say in this chapter that when you bring something home unusual, something that really intrigues you, you're often bringing home inspiration as well. Can you give us some examples here about how a piece that you have salvaged inspired something else in a room?
We bought this crazy buffalo leather armchair down at Round Top a couple weeks ago.
Nice.
And like, not something we would normally buy. It's called like the glove chair. It's a very famous like Italian design.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the focal point of the living room, is kind of being built around that. And it doesn't match the rendering, but you know, when are you gonna see one again? And it was just, it had the right texture, the right weird look. It's gonna look good with the wall that's behind it that we've already designed. Another thing we say in the book too, it's just like fall in love with a piece, get it, and figure it out from there. A blank piece of paper is always like the most intimidating thing when you're going to draw. Well, if you love something, you start that first piece, and now the room's not blank anymore.
That's
So
right.
it's a good point to start off with.
That's right. What about you, Bo? Do you have an example you can think of?
But from the book, this was in the funky chapter. This particular house, it was completely fire damaged.
Okay.
And the only thing that the owner kept was the fireplace with this beautiful yellow glazed brick tile that she said that it was black when she got it, and she wiped it clean and saw that color.
Yep.
And I think that's what was her inspiration to the rest of her home. And then she made that the focal piece. So to the left is her range, to the right is her sink. And she used Salvage antique glass for the backsplash in that kitchen. And I feel like she probably saw that gold and yellow flakes in that antique glass and probably had some type of connection of like, this is going to look so great next to my fireplace.
Right.
So that's, I think that's my example of how you can have a blank room with one architectural element, and then that unconsciously built off the rest of the design.
Absolutely. And like Kyle, you were saying when you were at Round Top, which for those of you who may not know, Round Top's a huge, fabulous antiques market show in Texas, that you just happened upon this chair. You didn't know you wanted a chair. You hadn't planned for it to be and look anything like this. And you bought it. And I think that it's that moment of serendipity that you just don't get with any other kind of shopping. You just don't know what you're going to find. You don't even know what you want or need, maybe. And you fall in love with something, and then it becomes the life of the room. And I think that is really, all of the photos in your book really show that. I mean, these are the homes where everyone's going, oh my God, where'd you get that? How did you think of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, our whole brand is furniture with a story.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all these houses and the pieces that we buy too. It's about the story that goes with it is just as important as the piece itself. A lot of the owners in these places, none of them are professional designers, and they weren't working with architects and designers. They just did it themselves. So that's why everything is so chaotic in a great way. It's just,
well, you know that a real human lives there that has a very particular point of view. They have certain passions or values or interests or whatever I mean, I don't know these people, but I'm going to make a bold guess here and say that these homes really reflect who they are.
Yeah.
And then even when it came to the photography, we didn't hire a stylist. We wanted to show their imperfectly perfect space. Like I said, we wanted this book to be approachable and realistic to everyone who wants to read it.
And I think that it is inspiring in that way. And, you know, people are going to look at it and go, oh yeah, I could do that. Or I could buy something from you guys. I mean, you know, let me just say, you have a whole shop. I mean, you're not just book authors. You actually sell these pieces, and we'll be sure to link to your website and the show notes page. I want to wrap up by asking you on a personal level, what are you most proud of when you think about your work? Because I think that there's some depth there to why you do what you do.
Oh God. Well, I'm just most proud of the journey we've had from starting in our 1-car garage, picking materials off the street, to where we are now. We wrote a book. Our workshop's in a 24,000 square foot old Dodge dealership that we transformed. We're artists and we're designers. We're constantly challenging ourselves to use the most wildest materials or any type of materials we can get our hands off. And I think it's so exciting. It's very stressful. Trust me, there's not one day where me and Kyle aren't stressed, but being able to really push ourselves and train our eyes. And, you know, for us, there's no rules in what we do. And I think that's truly what it means to be an artist and to pave your own way. But yeah, what do you think, Kyle?
I think I'm glad that we haven't conformed, because it'd be really easy for us at this point to be like, you know what? We're making solid oak, solid maple furniture now. Getting at the lumber yard, way easier. Way easier. But we are still working as artists and really trying to challenge people design wise. It's such an individual end product that you get that you just can't replicate at the big box stores or the big design firms. And I think that's what people want now. I think they want that individual aspect. They want their house to feel different than their neighbors. And that's something that we can provide as designers and artists that, you know, not everyone can.
Right. I mean, the other thing you could easily do is start doing productions of these signs, right? And just stamp it out and just go, okay, this is the sign from the Dodge dealer, and we're just going to, you know, copy it, and which would immediately change the feel of it and devalue it. And that would be absolutely the antithesis of what your stuff does for a home. And it's one of a kind. I mean, it's the only sign out there that's like this. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I also have to say what I think you should be proud of that you have not mentioned is how much you've given back to this community. You have great community ties. And also, I mean, you're saving things from going into a landfill. So, you know, give yourself some pats on the back for those two things. And the last thing I want to ask you, I guess, is, do you want to talk a little bit about your community and how much Detroit means to you?
Yeah, I mean, we love our city. We love our community. We don't have any plans of moving out of here. The city is just so inspiring, from the people in it to the architecture to the landscape. It's been through probably harder times than any other city in the country, and its battle scars they're evident. You go down any block and it's evident. But you know, it's also kind of inspiring, because same thing I said about everyone's house looks the same. All the cities in my mind look the same. You go to any plaza, whether you're in Cleveland or Dallas, and you got the same stores and the same facades.
It's so sad.
You come to Detroit and you're like, this is interesting.
I love it.
This is different. We're really blessed to have the community that we have, and really been awesome to see the city kind of bounce back and be a little part of that.
Well, thank you guys so much for this conversation, but thank you really for all of the work that you're doing. It's great to see these pieces actually in homes where people are living and using them and incorporating them into their own styles. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.